Awesome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our wonderful strategy session today, Building a Better Team. My name is Andy Saldaña, and I'm the Executive Director of New York Tech Alliance. We have a fantastic panel put together for you today, done in partnership with our partners Insperity to talk about building a better team, especially during this time. And we have the wonderful Joaquin Roca from Minerva also joining the panel. You're in for a fantastic conversation, but before we get to the conversation, just a few quick thank yous and announcements from New York Tech Alliance, and then we'll get right into it. First up, if you want to learn more about New York Tech Alliance, please check us out at nytech.org. Our mission is to drive access, equity, and inclusion in the New York tech community, making it the most diverse and dynamic in the world. You can always reach out to me personally at andy@nytech.org. I'm always here to help, and we're always excited to connect. A quick privacy statement. While we don't show any of the audience on screen, if you do have a question, we might put it on screen. We do video these sessions, and we do post them on our YouTube. So just be aware of that. To ask a question in this session, I'm going to ask that you do it in the messages section. You do that by clicking messages and then clicking the X button to get to the general chat and the Q&A piece of the platform. A quick thank you to all of our wonderful annual partners that make the work that we do possible, including Insperity and everyone from Google, MasterCard, Nation Builder, Rhythm, and the number of others that you see here. We encourage you to check them out on our website at nytech.org/partners. And then if you like what we do, we encourage you to support New York Tech Alliance by making a small donation when you RSVP, becoming an individual or corporate member on our website, or simply, again, making a small donation on our website. You can find all of that information there at nytech.org. And then we encourage you to attend upcoming events. The next one is Tuesday, October 22nd. We'll be doing a one-on-one conversation for our Founder Spotlights event with Sarah Mull of VinSocial. She's an amazing founder, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation. And then on Tuesday, November 2nd at 5:30 p.m., we'll be back with our November New York Tech Meetup, and it's all about accessibility in tech. We have an amazing group of speakers and demos scheduled for you, all about making tech more accessible for the disabled population. So I encourage you to check that out and come and network. Get ready to do more networking on this amazing platform, AirMeet. And then we record, as I mentioned, all of our events, and we put them on our YouTube channel. So we encourage you to subscribe to that YouTube channel, stay up to date with all of the latest videos that we've posted, and see all of the amazing content, just like the panel that we put together today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jill Chapman from Insperity to take over and introduce the panel.
All right. So as mentioned from Andy, I'm Jill Chapman. I work with Insperity as a senior performance consultant, assigned to our Kingwood operation, but having an opportunity to work with startups and existing organizations and those that are even looking to think about merger or acquisition all across the country. And also on the panel with me is what we fondly refer to ourselves as JARMAS. Other folks call us, a work couple. She's my work wife. So Carmis Adams is performance consultant in partnership with me and the rest of the organization at Insperity. And then we have Joaquin. Joaquin is CEO and co-founder of Minerva. Minerva Knows. And what we want to talk to you about today is this idea that, you know what, when you get into business, and it really doesn't matter if you're in a startup situation, if you're in a well-seasoned organization, or at a place where you are thinking maybe about mergers and acquisitions, it doesn't matter at what stage you're at, you're going to have challenges, right? They're going to come. That's just part of the deal. And so knowing what to do when those challenges arise, that's going to be paramount to the success of your business, right? Because these problems are going to come in no particular order. So how do you prepare for this sort of thing? And really at the end of the day, it's all about managing your risk and investing in the people who will help you take your company to the next level, whatever that might look like. Because so that's really kind of what we're here to talk about, is that investment in the talent in your organization. Whether you're looking to bring them in with you right now, or you're looking to move some people around. I think that's important for us to talk about. I think it's also very important for us to just establish from the get-go that if you want to be a successful business, I think a positive company culture has to be at the core of your organization, right? It's that foundation that that you're going to be standing on as a business, and you can't leave that to chance. You can have culture by design or culture by default, and why wouldn't you want it to be the prior, right? The by design, because what your culture is the values and the beliefs of your organization. A way that I've heard it talked about is, how is it that as you think about your culture, how do you want your people to feel when they walk in the door, right? That's the heartbeat of your organization, and the core of your business is that culture. And as a founder, as a leader of the organization, it's important for you to understand what's important to you, right? What's important to you as an individual, and what you think is going to be important for the success of your employees. So I want to involve Joaquin in the conversation here from the very start. So Joaquin, let's talk a little bit about Minerva and how you began to craft your culture of the organization even before you opened the doors of the organization.
Yeah. So my co-founders and I are very much of the belief that the most permanent thing at the organization will be our culture, right? That is the one thing that is unlikely to change if we do things right. And the culture will drive every other bit of the organization. It drives the way that we work together. It drives the way that we work with shareholders and stakeholders and customers and clients and users and build product, et cetera. And so from day one, the first thing that we did, there are three co-founders, was talk about our mission, our vision, and our values, and then figure out how are we going to live those values? How are we going to operationalize those values in a way that our policy and process and all the different things that we do as a company reinforce those values and reinforce that culture. And that was a Friday a couple of years ago. And every Friday since, we've come together as a group, starting with just the three founders and growing it to a team of 16 to talk about how do we reinforce and live those values and build our culture.
Right. So let's take that and peel it back a little bit. Like one of those ideas, and not everybody's going to have the same value system. Not everybody's going to have the same mission and vision. But as you take one of them, how did you first articulate it, and then how did you walk it out? Like, how do you prove out that we are a company that's going to walk with integrity, or that we're going to be a company that considers teamwork first, or whatever your value might be? Give us an example, and then and let's kind of talk about what that looks like when it shows up at work.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that you can do when thinking about organizational values is to dive a bit deeper into the deep assumptions of the business. They have to be based on what you believe, what the founding team believes, what the company believes it must do in order to succeed and win in the market that you're competing in. If it doesn't get to that level, if it's not tied to business imperatives, then they're nice to haves and you're likely to violate them. But if you truly believe these values rise to the level of, if we violate these, we will put the business in danger of failure. It has to be that level of commitment for you to build your business around those values. And so that's what we did. We decided, hey, look, these are it turns out we have 6 of them. These are the 6 values that are important to us in such a deep way that if we violate these, if we don't build toward these, if we don't work in a way that embodies these 6 values, we're going to fail as a business. And so that's kind of the first bit. The hard work is to unearth those unspoken, oftentimes really deep assumptions that are implicit and make those explicit.
Great. Fantastic. And then, as you said, to get together on a regular basis to make sure that everybody is understanding how important these things are to the success and the ongoing success of the business. Karma's here at Insperity, Paul tells a very, very similar kind of story, how it was really the sort of thing that they started talking about even before they built out the business plan, right? So what kind of things along the idea of culture by design, give us some insight into Insperity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that really great question. So Paul's, his vision was very clear. I mean, he was very intentional about every aspect of what he wanted that to look like. And at the premise of it all is that we realize that placing people in position is probably the easiest thing that you can do. Like, you can go and get a quandary of people, but it's finding the top talent that will take your business to the next level is a whole nother story. So, if you think about it, your people are your business. They're the heart of what makes your company successful. When you absolutely have the right fit, your company starts to experience increased profitability, performance, and productivity. The three essentials to any successful business is really making sure that you're attracting the right talent that's required to take a look at really what your company culture needs to be. So you need to make sure that those people that you're attracting are going to cohabitate in the cultural, or what we call the cultural add or the cultural addition, to make sure that all that sustains itself. So recruiting tactics and hiring processes all need to be intentional.
Right. So, I mean, without a plan, that's probably a great segue into a more pointed conversation about why recruiting is important in the first place, right? But I'm here to tell you, your people are what matter, right? Because the difference between my business and Joaquin's business, it's not necessarily our product or service. It's the people that we picked to live our corporate values out and to provide that product or service into the marketplace. So your people are everything. And that's what makes recruiting so important. And then the whole recruiting experience. There is such thing as a recruiting experience. And I think one thing that we have to learn in today's marketplace is that as we bring people closer to our organization, thinking about joining our firm, there may be times that it's right, and there may be times that it's not quite right now. Right? Because I think no is not a no forever, it's a no for right now. And so we want to make sure that the processes that we're putting somebody through and attracting them and bringing them closer to our organization is such a process that they leave, whether we hire them or not, as an advocate for our firm, right? The last thing I always tell our recruiters internally at Insperity, the last thing that I would want to have happen is for a candidate who made it through a lot of the process. We had to let them go at the end of the process because we had somebody that was just going to be a better fit in this moment for that particular role. But I would hate for them to be walking down the hall and some people talking about joining Insperity, as a client firm, and this candidate walks by and says, "Oh no, don't do that." That would be the worst. I had an experience with them; it's horrible, right? I want these people who leave us to be ambassadors for us, and understand how they can advocate for us, whether it's a positive hiring experience or not. So that's why we want to make sure that we, to Glenn's point, making somebody feel valued wherever they end up in the process, whether they're released from the process early on or later. But once they get into our funnel, once we've attracted them to our organization, I think it's so critical, right, that we treat them as we would a customer. And that's really kind of what your recruiting process is. It's a bit of a we need to think about it the same way that we look about trying to identify a potential customer, right? And we're marketing to them just like we'd be marketing to our consumers. So Carmus, Andy put up for us this funnel, this pyramid, if you will, upside down pyramid, I guess. But can you spend a few minutes talking to this and just to the importance of each step in this? And I think the point that I would want to make is the time to think about this stuff is not when your back's up against the wall and you're trying to bring people into the organization, right? This is a time when you kind of step out, like you did to build out your culture, but you step out and you think about it and you are very strategic in how you handle these most important business decisions that you're likely to make in a year, right? Is adding those people to your organization. So Carmus, can you speak to this for just a minute?
Hi, absolutely. So it's almost like, just by show of hands, and we can't see your hands, but just for the sake of it, it's like building a house. You really cannot build a home without a structural foundation. And so for this, we kind of have that same methodology. And that is, in order to even know what we're going to do, we need to understand from a business perspective or for a partner perspective, what exactly is that structure going to look like? And it needs to be solid because it can be shaky. And we don't want it to be shaky, right? We want it to be as foundationally solid as possible. And with that, we take a lot of time on that front end to really understand what is your philosophy? What are some of the policies and processes that you currently have in place and or not, so that we can figure out how to make sure that that structural foundation can stay, right? It can stay and stick and stay. So little things like making sure that we talk through what your job design needs to be like. What is it that you're going to be able to afford and offer for the positions and the people that you want to attract? Okay. And then that interview and selection process is going to be pivotal because you need to be able to have the right questions in place. You need to make sure that you have the right people in place that have structured interview processes and the right questions. Because when you think about just where we are in the world today with that diversity, equity, and inclusive model, we really need to make sure that those questions, our goals, are embedded in the interview process. Because if you have a goal, you need to make sure that you do all the things that are structurally sound in the beginning of that process. And this is where all of that stuff starts to happen. And then once you've gotten the foundation solid, right, you want to make sure that if you're going to start advertising, right, what does your brand development need to look like? What is it right now? Because we also know that if you have a brand, that's a brand. And then the absence of a brand is also a brand, right? And so if you're going to attract people to you, you want to make sure that your career website is such that people want to stay and apply, and also understand a lot more about your business. And so we work with a lot of companies around this section, because a lot of times we don't always think about what their brand might feel like for the external person wanting to consider that company as an employer. So we advertise, right? And when you advertise, you want to make sure that you have a strategic advertising plan, because guess what? Not everybody that you are looking for is going to apply to you, right? They're not going to necessarily apply to your job. So you also want to make sure that you have a strategic sourcing plan, so that if those people that you are looking for are not necessarily looking for you, you know how you're going to go find them, right? So you got to have some strategic sourcing programs in place and strategies, and we help our clients with that as well. And then once we get to that, it's down to the selection process. So once we've gotten that, now we're focused on determining who is it that we feel like is going to be the best fit for our organizations. So we want to work with our recruiters and our clients on interviews and how to best interview those people, to make sure you only get one time in front of these people, and it's a competitive market. Don't know if you guys have seen that out there, but it is super competitive. It's like recruiting, and people are like the housing market right now. They can get any job that they want. So make sure you're top of mind. And then once we get through that selection process, it's assessing, right? We don't just trust them, right? We want to trust them and then verify. So we do have assessment tools in place that allow us to check, to test what we're about to buy. It's kind of like going to the dealership. You might want to take it for a test drive first, right? So we do have personality and skills-based training in place to help with that. And then also that background and drug screening process is pivotal, because you definitely want to make sure that you know a little bit about who you're buying before you onboard them, because that can be a risky relationship if you do not. And then finally, the most important part, the best part of this whole funnel and structure is the offer management phase. We've determined who we're going to hire, what's going to help us get to that productivity and take us to the next level. And that is making sure that we have an offer management process. And then we are properly onboarding these people to help us take our companies and our clients' companies to the next level. So.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you for that. I think some of the points that we might want to bring up and kind of go to what Glenn's been talking about in the chat around the idea of making the employee or the potential employee to feel comfortable as they move through this. And that's part of the reason that you want to make sure that you've thought about it before you have people actually going through it, right? My hope for organizations would be that they're so well thought out about the expectations of the recruiting process for their organization that when they need to hire somebody, it's like flipping a switch, right? And it's very easy, and it's easy on the applicant. So again, that goes back to that recruiting experience. If you don't know what it feels like to be an applicant in your firm, why don't you try it? See how hard it is to get an application in front of a recruiter. See what happens when that happens. and kind of test the waters, in a kind of competitive shopping. Maybe test the waters with some of your other organizations, your competitive organizations, to see what it feels like to be one of theirs, because that ease of application, because we are in a war for talent, can be the difference maker in how somebody feels about joining your firm. If I have to jump through a lot of hoops before I even get a conversation with you, I don't know about that, because then in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, when I join the firm and I need a new pencil, I'm going to have to jump through hoops to be able to get that, right? And it's really about the communication. Like Glenn said, there's a lot of people who never hear, what's going on with their application at the front end and definitely at the back end. So, and I don't think, I know we live in a push button society. I don't think that everybody just expects, oh, I interviewed today and they're going to make an offer this afternoon. I don't think that people have the expectation that it moves that quickly. However, I think that they do have an expectation that you're going to be honest and have a conversation about how transparent the process is, what they can expect next. But in the absence of that information, they make stuff up, right? And so you don't want to making up things like, oh, I didn't get the job. Oh, they don't like me. Oh, this, oh, that. No, just be straightforward with them, have conversations and lead them through the process. And again, have some sort of way that you can keep track of this, right? Because again, you're not going to hire everybody who applies to your organization, but you might want them in the future. So if you have some sort of an applicant tracking, some way to keep in touch with these people over time, keep them somewhat tethered to your organization, I think that that's going to be beneficial to you as well. But hey, Joaquin, what kind of steps do you guys do at Minerva to make sure that you have a really good candidate experience?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different things that I think are really important there. I think you need to first start by attracting the right people. And I think that part of that is ensuring that your organization isn't for everyone. This may feel counterintuitive, but like if someone's looking at your culture or your organization, and there's no one who would say, I don't want to work there, that's not for me. Really, do you have a differentiated culture, right? If it's not so well differentiated that some really good, talented people are going to say, you know what, that's not for me. I think that you need to take strong stances like that. And so that you are attracting and not attracting and repelling people who wouldn't be good culture fits. It's really
I think
important.
that's so critical. Yeah, exactly. That kind of talks to Carmus's idea about that branding. What's going to be that big magnet that brings them to, but yeah, you don't want to interview everybody. You just want to interview the right people for your organization. So go ahead and let those other people go on down the road, find something that's better suited for them. Absolutely.
Yeah. So like in tech, I know a bunch of folks for a long time have like drinking culture is a big part of startups. And so there's like oftentimes like a keg in the office, right, as a perk. For Minerva, we're a dry workplace. It's not that everyone, like I'll drink with my friends and my colleagues off hours, but we make it very clear that, look, if there's alcohol involved, that's not an official work event. That could be a social event that you're all going to, but that's not a work event. In tech, that stance is going to take a lot of folks out of our applicant pool. They're going to say, look, that's not what I want. I want something that's more of a party environment or a fun environment, what they think would be. And what we're trying to be is more inclusive, right? We're trying to be an environment that values accessibility and community within our workplace. And we know that some folks have had bad experiences with alcohol. Some folks are in recovery. Some folks were assaulted by someone who had alcohol, et cetera. And so we think that, we want to be a more inclusive environment. And if you need alcohol to engage with your team or to this is not the environment. And that's okay, because there are lots of places where you can go work. And so I think that's on the branding side, right? The attraction side. It's not only attracting the people who think, oh, you know what? That sounds like a really good environment for me personally. It's also telling other people, look, if this is not what you want, you really shouldn't be here. And I don't want to go through that application process, the interview process, make an offer, hire someone, and then find out that it's not a good fit. And so it's really important, I think, to create processes, to create ways of helping people understand that they want to be a part of this community or they don't want to be a part of this community, and being really open and upfront about that, even if they're talented people that you're going to lose out on.
Right. Yeah, because there's talented people everywhere. That's why we have so many companies in America. But we want the talented people that fit with what our game plan is and what our hopes are for our organization. So that's fantastic. And to be able to to be mindful of it. That's what we've been talking about, is know what it is and be able to share that with people. Share the story of, this is why we're committed to this. And then allow people to opt in or opt out of the process anywhere along the way. But that ease of application, that ease of conversation, that understanding who you are and how you get that message out there is so critical to making sure that you're getting the right talent, not just any talent, into your organization. Because we can slap a lot of stuff up against the wall and hope that it sticks, right? But that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for people who are going to bring value to our organization, who are going to invest in our organization like we're going to invest in them. And so it takes a very purposeful process to be able to do that, And Carmen was talking about that strategy, like, what's your philosophy? Well, are people important to your business, or are they replaceable cogs in a wheel? And some companies are going to decide that is what they are. Okay. But know going into it, this is how critical people are to our success. And this is why we're going to invest in this part of the process. Well, we've talked about it off and on. And, Joaquin just did a great job of telling a little bit more about their culture and how their culture is one of inclusiveness, and what some of the steps that they're taking to make sure that happens. But, there's that question. Do I hire for culture, or do I hire for the skills that somebody brings? I think after all these years that gave me all this gray hair, I'm probably going to argue for that culture, right? Because I can teach people to do a lot of stuff. I can teach them development tools. I can teach them all sorts of things, but I don't know that I can teach those motivators that are going to get them to give me that extra that I need in order to have a successful workforce. So I think it's really important when you're thinking about people and you're looking at your candidate pool and you're trying to determine between candidate A and candidate B, skills, culture. Carmen's had a great phrase. She called it a cultural add. I think sometimes we hear about cultural fit. And I think, to me, that kind of paints a picture of everybody's just going to be, we're all still going to look a lot and act a lot alike because we all fit in together. But that idea of a cultural add or a cultural complement, right? So that we can get those ideas of diversity. But I think when you're in that hiring seat and you're trying to make a decision about, am I going to add for culture? Am I going to add for skills? Then you have to have an honest conversation with yourself. How much are you willing to teach? How much are you willing to invest in that person, right? And what can you train and what can't you train for? And I think if you can separate that out and you understand kind of from a realistic position where you sit, then I think you're going to make wiser decisions in who you bring in, because the idea of a bad hire, somebody who doesn't fit, it's going to cost you some money, right? There's all sorts of hard costs associated with that. There's the soft costs that look like disappointed customers and things like that are going to impact your organization. But Carmus, if you can take just a couple of minutes and talk about how the interview process, the hiring process, really, let's talk a little bit more about how you can set it up to support diversity initiatives.
Absolutely. So in terms of just diversity initiatives, it's like you really have to take an honest approach at where you are right now and where it is that you want to go, right? So when we say cultural add, it is what Jill just mentioned. It's like we have to be careful. We don't want to keep reduplicating what already exists. We want to add additional faces, additional nationalities, additional backgrounds, because the data out there suggests right now, or not just right now, and always has, is that if you have a diversity of employees within your organization, it creates a lot more productivity and a lot more creativity, because you're starting to add value to your organization with a diversity background. So little things like making sure that in your advertisements that you are approaching different platforms to attract different types of professionals into your organization. It doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional ways in which you recruit. So we all know about the big platforms like Career Builder and Indeed and Monster. But if you think about it, there are so many others out there, so many organizations that you can then partner with to attract those cultural additions to your organization. So being strategic about that becomes a lot more intentional when you're starting to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. So I would say that is probably the meat of it all, and making sure that you have a game plan of questions when you bring people in to make sure that you're not necessarily solving for what's already there. Because a lot of times in the recruiting process is we want to hire people that look like us, that are in the same organizations like us, or in the same colleges. I'm an LSU Tiger. So before I used to say, if I found an LSU Tigers resume, absolutely you're going to join us. But does that really mean that that person can do the job? Absolutely not. So just knowing your hidden biases can help you uncover ways to be more diverse and more intentional about that process. So I hope that answers your question, Jill.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Joaquin, I know that you guys are very insightful in this area, that you're very purposeful in this area, but you got anything to add about how the diversity hiring has really impacted the success there at your organization?
Yeah, I think it's important for every organization to reflect on what success looks like, right? If you're an organization who believes that you should be selling to straight cis white men, maybe having a team of all straight cis white men is a good way to go. I think you're probably still missing out on some stuff, but it could be a good strategy. I don't think that's a good growth business. So think about the perspective that you want to have in your business and who you're selling to. The other question that you have to ask yourself is, where do you think talent lives? Where do you think talent and ability and wisdom come from? Is it equally distributed amongst people, or is it the domain of a certain group? I believe it's equally distributed. And so if I look at my organization and we're not representative of the communities that we're part of, we're probably missing out on a ton of talent, which is awful for the world, but really wonderful for Minerva, because we'll go searching for that underappreciated talent. We'll give them a place where they want to work, where they feel valued, where their voices are heard, where they're able to bring their full selves, and we're going to find talent that other folks aren't going to find. And so just from a dirty capitalist perspective, I found an inefficiency in the market that allows us to be competitive for better talent than other folks have, because we've created a more inclusive spot, because we have a place where people's voices are heard and valued. Now, if you don't believe talent is equally distributed, diversity, equity, and inclusion shouldn't be part of your business, right? Because that's a waste of your time. That's a PR stunt. And it's going to lead to bad outcomes for the talent that you find that don't see through that. And it's also bad outcomes for you, because you're not going to be listening to the voices that you've hired. So again, I don't think it's for every business. I don't think it's for every team. If you don't believe talent is equally distributed, if you're not looking to engage with communities outside of specific ones, don't look for diverse talent.
And that it brings up so many thoughts, Joaquin. We're living in a time that really kind of these conversations have come to the surface a lot more than they were for a while, right? But what is wrong-headed thinking, I'm just going to say, are these people who say, I need to check this box, right? So I want to open up the pool because I need to check this box. Well, just checking a box is not a diversity roadmap for your organization. And we talk a lot about being onlys, right? And so if you're just checking a box, there's a good likelihood you're bringing an only into your organization. And you can't do that lightly. You've got to be prepared for the support. You've got to be prepared for the kinds of things that they may add to your organization and how you're going to move forward with that. Because if it's just to check a box, it's going to have horrible results for you and for that individual. Can you imagine being that individual? Like that would just be a miserable existence to have to come to work every day and not be able to bring your full self. And Carmen's alluded to it, but there's so many studies out there that says, when you have a diverse team, they're going to outperform a high potential heterogeneous team every single time, right? And so being able to access that different way of seeing things, that different lens to look at the world can be everything for creation or solving problems. But I think it also helps you, especially if you're going out to the marketplace, with new ideas for new markets, right? And things that you might not have thought about because you're sitting there with your glasses on, right? And so I think it provides such an opportunity. But to your point, Joaquin, it's not for everybody. And if you're going to talk about it, if you're going to say it, then you need to be prepared to invest in it and do it the right way, because just doing it to check a box is not solving anybody's problems, right? At the end of the day.
Two of my favorite examples there in terms of people like to say think outside the box, but our experiences, our knowledge is kind of the box that we're in, right? You can expand that box. And two really great examples of expanding the box that are really, again, this is a business imperative, right? You're talking to business folks, you want to give them, what is the ROI there? What you think of Band-Aids. For the longest time, Band-Aids were Crayola type, quote unquote, flesh colored. We know that flesh is not one color. And oftentimes women, I'm not a woman, but women use Band-Aids apparently in their shoes. If you're wearing certain shoes, they're less comfortable, you're going to put Band-Aids on. Band-Aids that are quote unquote flesh colored, which again, doesn't blend in with the majority of the women who might put those on their shoes. And so having just one color of Band-Aid was really bad for business. And so if Band-Aid decided to go out and create a blend of different colors that you might find, wow, that's a market opportunity. And one, if you don't have any women on your team, you're not going to realize that that's going to be important for a look, is the color of your Band-Aid. Two, just thinking that's messing up the look of my shoe is not going to come to certain women. And so just expanding the pot there. I think also Sharia compliant home loans are a really interesting thing. I don't know how much people know about this. I've not looked into it in a long time, but usury, charging interest is you cannot do that. And so for much of the Muslim world, which is a large portion of the world's population, actually home ownership was not accessible because they couldn't take a mortgage with interest. And so there's a special instrument that's used called Sharia compliant home loans, where you're kind of co-owning a home and you're buying equity. And the amount that the person is paying back, they're just purchasing equity from you. They're not paying interest, but purchasing back equity. And that's actually going to fluctuate with the value of the home. And so it's not a fixed thing, or potentially it's not a fixed thing. It's more of a just buying and participating. And actually, if you think about the home loan crisis from, it's 13 years ago. I can't believe it's 13 years
Can you believe? Right, exactly.
But part of the problem there was subprime rates in interest. And if you're not charging interest, if it's actually just based on the equity in the home, then the value would go down, but the person's indebtedness to the bank would also go down. And so you're never underwater because you're only looking to buy back the equity in the house. It's such an interesting instrument that if you didn't have Muslim folks on your team as a part of a financial institution, you would never think to create a Sharia compliant home loan. And so there are business imperatives for this, right? That diversity is for almost every business an imperative, that if you're not hiring if you're not engaging, it's not just hiring, like you said, Jill, if you're not engaging these folks and giving them real responsibility, giving them the powers to make decisions, you're gonna lose at business.
Right, exactly. What is that quote from Verna Myers? She did a TED talk about this eons ago now, but about the differentiation between diversity and inclusion and equity, and it's about not only getting invited to the dance, but being asked to dance once you're there, right? And then the ability to feel like you're dancing like nobody's watching, right? So that you can be your whole self and bring your full self to work. There's a lot of conversation around that whole idea of the she, easy for me to say, I talk for a living, right? She session of the women who have left the workforce as a result of COVID. And part of that is a direct result of some of the things that happened in the in the prior few months. And it was that feeling of I can't be myself at work. And so my whole self at work. And whether it was issues that I might have because my kids were running into the Zoom call, or I had some responsibilities with them, or that I was reeling from some social injustice issues, and I just couldn't be myself. People are often I'm out of here. And so interestingly, there's that lost worker phenomenon. Have you guys heard that mentioned around about how many people are evaporating out of the workforce right now? And here's a little tidbit that you need to think about, maybe. Talking about diversity, let's talk about bringing different kinds of ages and kinds of people into our organizations. And they say, I didn't realize this, but they say the millennials are set to inherit one of the greatest transfers of wealth from one generation to another, $68 trillion between now and 2030. And so that's going to create a population of people who aren't going to put up with it because they've got some financial freedom there, right? And so if they're not feeling like they can be their whole selves at work, or they're not being attended to or included in what the work is doing, they may just opt out and say, I don't need to be here anymore. So they're going to have a lot of options. They already have a lot of options. Right? Like all of our people have a lot of options right now. It's probably why this conversation is so interesting to so many people, but get ready for that little tidal wave that should be coming between now and 2030. And I'm not making a smooth segue here, but I don't think we can leave this conversation, because I think diversity blends into the culture of our organization. So I don't want to leave today without talking just a hot minute about what culture really is. And we talked about how you define it and that sort of thing. But I want everybody to not feel like it belongs inside a building, right? Like culture's not what's in a wall. In an organization, but it's really how we do things around here, right? And so if you want to be able to share your culture or get new people to understand what your culture is, what it is, how we do things around here, I think that it's going to be important to promote a positive culture. Joaquin talked about it early on, about how they said, what does this look like when it comes to work? How do we walk this out? How do we lead by example and give clear direction as to what we expect, how we expect people to treat one another and how we expect people to behave here. Any issues, any kind of lessons that you learned along the way, Joaquin, about, what it takes from a leadership perspective to imbue the culture throughout the organization?
I think one thing is you have to be very intentional about it. Mm-hmm. You have to, like I said before, believe that culture is related to business success through those underlying assumptions around the business. Those underlying assumptions inform your values, and your values inform your policy and your process and the way that you work. And so I think that everything that you do is informed by the values and thus the assumptions of the business. And so from your performance reviews to your hiring practices to your customer support and customer success teams, the way you run meetings, everything should be inspired by that. So we have at Minerva, every document is supposed to, doesn't always happen, but every document is supposed to have a value statement, right? Okay. In addition to purpose and an executive summary, why does this document exist? Here's an executive summary of this document. How does this document further our 6 cultural values? It's supposed to be present there. Every bit of feedback we give, one of the most active channels in our Slack group at work is kudos. And every bit of feedback is linked back to those 6 values or some subset of those 6 values, if not all 6. And so making sure that you are living the values in the way that you run the business, in everything that you do, I think is the most important thing, because the assumptions, the values themselves rarely changed. And okay, great, we've got them. It's the way that you interact with people, it's the way that you work that is actually creating culture every day. People will notice what gets rewarded. People will notice what is successful in your business. And those things should be rooted in your culture and your values.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. So I was actually kind of planning that we might talk a little bit about, how technologies kind of changed the workplace or some trends in the workforce, but that's a beautiful way to kind of end this conversation. And I know we're bumping up against our time together. We want to give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions. If you do want to talk about some of the trends that we're seeing in the marketplace right now, but now's your time. So ask. You got Joaquin here, you know, kind of a peer to you as a business owner in the tech space. So let's make use of it. So are there any, I see a raised hand, but I don't know what to do about it. So I don't know how to help. So can somebody help me help that raised hand right there? Okay, now what? What do we do? Andy?
Hello.
Oh, is that you?
Yeah.
Is this the raised hand?
Yeah.
Oh, yay. Okay, so we can make it work. So, okay, now all eyes are on you.
All right. Hello there.
Hi.
Am I audible?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Great to see you all. Like I had a query. So I'm from New York and like working on the blockchain and technology in the crypto space. So like we just like we're building a community with our like decentralized finance. So like my query was like this is the first session I'm attending with the New York Tech. So how to like, since it's a virtual space, how to connect with lovely people like you guys, and what's the way to like build good network among the New York Tech community? Because original.
Joaquin, I'm gonna leave that one to you, Joaquin, or if Andy wants to jump in too, and tackle that one.
I think that's a perfect question for Andy to answer.
Okay.
Hey,
No,
Andy.
welcome, and thank you so much for attending. I think attending as many of these events as possible is definitely a great way to create that networking community, and going to as many meetups and virtual events that you can within the community. There's so many amazing organizations within the New York City area that are focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, that are focused on different technologies such as blockchain, AI, AR, VR. Whatever you can think of, there's a group for it, and a great community for it. And my encouragement is, as you're building your own community, as you're building your own network and your own company, to be out in the community as much as possible, to take advantage of some of the offerings that exist, like office hours, and then be ready to have be willing to give back as well. And that's a big piece that I always recommend to founders. You know, the more that you are out in the community, speaking at these events like Joaquin, and giving back a little bit of your time to the community, it goes, it's exponential for anybody on the call,
Obviously.
and for your own business as well. So there's many opportunities, and I'll just leave it at that. If you want to connect offline, feel free to connect with me, and we'll continue the conversation.
Sure, Andy. Thank you so much.
Hey, Glenn has shared a couple of questions in the Q&A section, and I think we probably all have opinions about what he asked, but he's asking about the big resignation, right? The turnover tsunami, however you want to refer to it, and any other trends that are particularly surprising trends in hiring right now. So that whole big turnover tsunami thing is real. And what I think we have to think about is what we can do to protect our companies from being a victim to this sort of thing. But you got to think about like where people are, where are employees right now? What are they thinking? Well, if you think back prior to the COVID, there was already a war for talent, right? I know it's hard to kind of think about what life was like before the COVID, but 2019, early 2020, there was a lot of movement in the marketplace. People changing jobs, looking for something better, and wanting to move on. So we already had that feeling, that sense of a war for talent. And then here came COVID. We kind of put the brakes on. Some people lost their jobs just because the organizations closed. Some were furloughed. Some were laid off. And then those who were able to keep their jobs kind of held on to them through this whole thing, right? Well, think about it. They were possibly thinking about looking for work before the COVID. Now they're holding on, but are they really happy? Are they really thinking that this is what it is? And then how companies responded to the COVID had a lot to inform their decision about whether they wanted to make a break when the time was right. And it appears the time is right now. And so that's what we're seeing is this, this huge shift of people leaving for whatever reason. So I think in order to insulate our organizations from this, we need to learn from those people who are leaving. What was it that that caused, what was the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will? Because I think if we do exit interviews, what we're going to hear and what we're going to want to believe is, oh, they left for more money. Well, they may have, because there's a lot of people throwing a lot of money around right now. I can tell you that. But what was it that made them listen to that recruiter, apply to that job? What was the motivator that said it's time to go just because you see more money? It could be a whale of a lot of money, and you can't argue with that. But if they leave for a 2% increase or a 3% increase or a 5% increase even, there's more to that story, right? And so it's understanding what's that motivator, and then what can we do within our organizations to, again, insulate us from that happening again. It's likely something that happened with a person where they lost some trust in somebody in the organization, largely their managers. But that's probably one of the biggest motivators, or they're not feeling challenged. And here's a challenge to you. If we're kind of hunkered down, trying to do the best we can, and maybe we're running lean on staff, what's one of the first things that we stop? It's personal development, right? And I think when you talk to a lot of people, why did they leave? They didn't feel like they were getting invested in. They weren't getting the development that they needed where they were. And so I want to try to encourage you. Don't let that be your knee-jerk reaction, right? Don't let that investment in your people stop just because you feel really stretched and really strained right now, because that's the reason more will leave. And then it's a catch-22. That's kind of my take on the Great Resignation. I don't know if Carmes and Joaquin have other ideas.
I do. I mean, just to piggyback on what you said, Jill, all of that, and some, but then also too, when organizations need to literally be a lot more attentive, because you start to notice things with individuals that may have been top producers, right? Or have always been engaged and always been ready to go whenever you called their name, or if you didn't call their name, they were already prepared to overproduce or to basically to be a high producer. So if you start to notice those people stop engaging, or they're not as front line as they were, or they're not as engaged as they were before, that is a signal to touch bases. And sometimes we miss those signals. And if we get ahead of those things, we can salvage a lot of relationships, because a lot of times it's just the lack of communication that we are missing. And then also making sure that when we find out what's happening, that we auto-correct as quickly as we can. Because most people really do leave, not because of the organization, but it's because they're leaving a leader, or they're leaving their manager, or they're leaving because they don't feel like their manager is supporting them. Because you can throw a lot of money at people, like Jill said, but guess what? They can, if you think about how companies are restructuring their companies, they're leaving the brick and mortar and they're doing more online. So guess what? I can throw a lot of money at you right away, but if you don't do the job that I need you to do at the level that I need you, and can't commit to the hours that I want you to commit to, guess what? They're only gonna have to pay you that for a month or two, and then they're gonna go find someone else, right? So be mindful of that when you're even making decisions to leave your organizations, because all you have to do is communicate. Sometimes it's just a communication that needs to happen. And then as a leader, being intentional about noticing your top producers and where they are, so that you can curtail any movement as quickly as you can.
Right, because I'm going to argue about if they put in their resignation, I don't know, I'm kind of of the mindset that it's time to let them go, right? Maybe you can bring them back, you can have a good experience as they leave, but my experience has been, I've never seen, a lot of counter offers really pay off for the long haul. Maybe they're a Band-Aid approach for the short term for both parties, but you got to think about what that sounds like. Okay, so are we setting the precedent that if you want to get a raise around here, you just go out and say you got another job offer somewhere? Or if I'm the candidate and you finally pay me what I think I'm worth, or whatever that, it took me doing all that to get that? Like, you didn't recognize this about me before? So I always think there's a fissure there after that resignation has happened. So there's something to think about. Hey, we probably have time for one more question. I'm going to give this to Joaquin. How tech companies I think Tabinda is actually outside of, she has operations outside of the US. So the hiring structure, if you're looking to add tech people in the US, any kind of words of wisdom that you might have there, Joaquin? Because I never ask you, are all your people stateside, or do you have people all over the country? I mean, all over the world.
Yeah, all over the country and somewhat all over the world.
World, okay.
And we're only 16 folks.
Right.
So that was actually a product of COVID. We didn't expect to be building a remote company, but when COVID hit, we were only 3 full-time and another couple of folks part-time. And we just made the determination that talent exists again everywhere. And I think that is part of the answer to what I would say for the first question, is that remote work is actually one of the big trends right now. And then remote work and compensation for remote folks is another big open question that is difficult and important to grapple with. If I were a developer looking for a job in the US, I think applying to jobs, there are also platforms that specialize in outsourced developers, and some of them pay very well, right? For a software developer, something like TopTal. I know we work with TopTal, and they have top talent in software developers all over the world. If you were looking as, I'm not sure if this is maybe a question about being a dev shop that's trying to work with organizations. As far as I'm concerned there, it's almost going to be 100% referrals. I'm not going to take a meeting with a dev shop that cold calls me or reaches out via email. I just don't know you, but I have tons of folks in my network who have worked successfully and not successfully with various different dev shops. And so I'm going to take a referral. I'm going to ask my network. I'm going to ask the people who work in the business, who have you worked with in the past? And let's go with someone that we know will do a good job, or at least we're very confident will do a good job. It's very unlikely that I will even take a meeting with the dev shop reaching out saying, hey, I'd like to build software for you from wherever you are in the world.
Perfect. Thank you. And with that, I think we're right almost at time. So Andy, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that amazing conversation. And thank you to everyone who was in the audience for the amazing questions and the participation. I learned a lot today, and I run a very small organization and I'm building a very small organization, but I'm having a lot of these conversations constantly. So it doesn't really matter the size of the organization. It's really about what are your goals, how you're moving forward, what are the things you need to put in place, and what kind of culture you're looking to have from the beginning. I've always been an advocate of identifying that culture from the very beginning. And I feel like a lot of the conversations that we're having currently around the Great Resignation, diversity, equity, inclusion, a lot of that is solved by just sitting down with that core team from the beginning and just thinking about like, where do you want to go? How do you want to grow? What is the product that you're trying to create? And how do you bring more voices into that environment? There's so many, I could listen to you all talk for hours, and I have so many insights that I'd like to get on the table, but that we are at time. And I will mention that one of my favorite platforms for hiring remote workers or workers from all over that really specialize in underrepresented groups and women technologists is Power to Fly. They're an amazing organization that's really about helping women from all over the world access great jobs. And they've really are doing really fantastic virtual job fairs. So if any of your employers or employees are you know anybody looking for a job, it's always a great place to find something really amazing. And with that, I just want to say thank you to Jill, Carmis, and Joaquin for giving us their time today. And again, thank you to all of you. We'll see you at the next event, and please stick around for networking. We'll have the Army open for a few more minutes until 1:30. So if you have some time to connect with somebody, I encourage you to connect. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.